this video, you guys are about to see a short snippet from the Flex Success research review where Coach Shannon and I dive into a paper around hypertrophy and we look behind some of the mechanisms surrounding it and some practical applications for people.
Hi guys, and welcome to the next video research review. So we put this one to the group and this is the paper that you voted for. So we're going to be discussing all about hypertrophy. How can we grow muscle by manipulating our different training variables? So we thought that we would start off the discussion with a little bit of a background knowledge to kind of set the scene. So Dalton, would you like to talk about the physiology of muscle and how it actually grows?
Cool. Awesome. Hey guys, stoked to be back. And this is such a cool topic. So I'm glad that we all covered in on this because it really applies to literally everyone. We want everyone to get maximally jacked. We want everyone to be, have some serrata showing out and obliques flaring through, quads flared. But obviously that's not the case. But if for all the people that you're actually trying to help, let's set the scene and build up that knowledge for you so you guys are able to pass it on and help the most amount of people. So what is hypertrophy? Well, essentially, before we even look at how the muscle gets bigger, we want to talk about what it is, right? So hypertrophy is the increase of an organ or a tissue. We have also hyperplasia, which is an increase in the fiber types of that organ or tissue. So hypertrophy is just the same amount of things, just getting bigger, whereas hyperplasia is increasing the amount of something that you've got. So with humans, we don't really have much good evidence for hyperplasia, but we do for hypertrophy. In animal models, avian and mouse models, we see some hyperplasia being done. And even now, those old studies are kind of being redone again to look at in case it was like counting errors, which is really funny to hear. But all right, so what is it? What happens? The key distinct differences is that we enlarge our muscles. But for those that aren't familiar, what happens is we grow or add sarcomeres in series or parallel. And I'll actually go into explain all what this is so that you can understand. So if you can imagine that you've got a little block of muscle, a little block of a muscle component called a sarcomere. Now that block either grows in series, one on top of the other, or in parallel like this. So for those that aren't familiar or need a quick refresher, we'll start from the very smallest component of muscle, right? And we'll work backwards so that everyone can kind of understand. So the smallest unit that we've got is a myofibril. This is like a tiny, tiny, tiny amount. And along this tiny strand, you get the bands actin and myosin. Most people have kind of heard about what that is and they have an idea, but essentially these guys like to grab onto each other and kind of pull tight. That's just what that contraction is happening going on. Now, actin and myosin are filaments that contract and release to move our muscles. There's a Z disc on the end, which kind of designates what is our sarcomere, yeah? So a fun fact for you guys, those filaments that we were just talking about with the actin and myosin, that's actually what gives our muscles the striated appearance. So when you're looking at someone, you're seeing that striated appearance, it's due to all those actin and myosin pinching on and grabbing onto each other. So if you wrap heaps of those myofibrils, those single long bands that are going along around, you add some mitochondria, you add some blood capillaries, motor neurons, some nuclei, you're actually starting to get what we call a muscle fiber. Now, a muscle cell and a muscle fiber are the exact same thing. People hear them and think that they may be kind of a different thing, but the muscle fiber is the cells that run along the whole of the muscle there. Now, if you wrap heaps of those muscle fibers together, you get a fascicle. Wrap heaps of those fascicles together, you actually start to get the skeletal muscle. So now that we go back to this small actin and myosin, they're always trying to pull themselves together. They love each other. They're always trying to get back together. And we call this sliding filament. Now, when this happens enough, you get the recruitment of the muscle fiber. Now, from here, the recruitment of the muscle fiber, that muscle cell that we're talking about, there is a size principle that I want to introduce you guys to or make you understand. Once you recruit that fiber, as the fiber increases in fiber size, you get an increase in the size principle denotes that the amount of work being done is equal to the amount of the fiber size that needs to be equal to for the work to be done. So if you're doing, say, small fine movements, say finger movements, that the amount of work being done by those filaments are always going to be way smaller and much more precise. So you're not going to generate a massive amount of recruitment. Say, if you want to scratch yourself in the eye, you're not going to then punch yourself in the face by your body selecting too much of a fiber type for you to use your arm and hands and fingers to scratch your eye. Yeah, makes sense? So we've got muscle fibers. We know how the muscles are designated and around some of the components. We understand that there's a size principle, that the amount of work being done increases the fiber size recruitment so that we get that work achieved. Then we also have some muscle fiber types. Type 1, or slow twitch, red fibers, some of you may have heard. These are heavily oxygenated. Great for endurance exercise, but they really don't develop much hypertrophy. They do a little bit, but not much. Then we've got some of the white fiber types, type 2A and type 2X. 2A is kind of a mix between type 1 and type 2X. It does a little bit of hypertrophy. It's got a bit of mitochondria, red cells in it. It does a bit of everything, and it's all round. It's what most of our muscles are made up of. And then you get type 2X. This is completely fast twitch. This is the one that is going to hypertrophy the most. This is the one that we all want to make as big as possible. Now, why should we want to have more muscle? Well, basically, all of us want to get a little bit more jacked, but we all want someone else to be a little bit more jacked as well. It helps with either some of our enjoyment of life. It helps with your sport, your career. It may just help with the one outlet that you like to have. So for everyone else, it's kind of hard to sell them the idea of going to add some more muscle mass. But for you guys that are watching, it's really not. It's not that hard at all. You guys are already here paying attention, trying to figure out what you can do to make sure that you're growing more muscle. So some other examples for when it might be a good idea to build a little bit more muscle mass is during aging. Having more muscle mass actually increases independence later in life. Injury. If you recover from an injury and you repair not only the injured tissue, but you're able to increase muscle hypertrophy back to pre-injury states, you're going to have someone that returns far quicker and at a far better state than someone that doesn't. And atrophy happens a lot during injury. You also have a really cool preventative measure for people that are trying to just stave off obesity or lifestyle conditions. So those are the things that are why it's important for us to focus on building up some muscle mass.
Yeah, I think that's a really great introduction. And I like how you also mentioned how it's not just about looking a certain way, but there are also other benefits to growing muscle as well. So I think it's worth quickly discussing the mechanisms of muscle growth. And there are three main adaptations to training. First one being mechanical tension, and this is to do with the force of resistance. So this is kind of the primary mechanism for muscle growth. It's the conversion into chemical signals that are transduced to enhance anabolic signaling and while suppressing catabolic signaling. So this is, again, our kind of the primary mechanism of muscle growth. But you also have metabolic stress, which is the buildup of metabolites such as lactic acid, hydrogen ions, and inorganic phosphate, things like that, that can influence muscle remodeling. And then you also have muscle damage, which is the disruption of a muscle's ultrastructure, leads to a compensatory response and the breakdown of tissue.
So as we mentioned at the start, that was just a short snippet, and you can expect a whole bunch more over at the Flex Success website. And if you want to find out about more of our stuff, or you want to sign up to the research review yourself, you can do so and check out the description box below. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see more of these, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.